Hey, everybody, friends, nice to talk to you. I just wanted to say thank you to your meetup for this opportunity to talk about my favorite subjects. I'm a huge fan of LeSS. I have been since I first read the books and met Bus and Craig, and just happened to also be involved with the creation of the Nexus. So when this opportunity came up to, and I don't want to say it's a versus. I saw that was framed a couple times, Nexus versus LeSS, and it's more of a comparison. It's more of a running sort of ancestry DNA on both and seeing how they're connected in the roots. But can we get a slide up here? I'll tell you about myself here. Or do we have slides up?
Funny thing, Richard, because that was like the same thing we are talking with Jacek.
Okay.
Because the versus is like this a provocation. It's like a little bit of clickbait, I would say.
Yes. So that's not my intention, is to show how one is better than the other, because if I had to do that, I would probably get thrown out of this meeting. So my background, I'm Richard Hundhausen. I live in the U.S., a state called Idaho, and a town in there called Boise. And I saw Doug Spencer on here. He knows where that is because he's just next door in Oregon. But I was sort of an inside kid growing up, so I spent a lot of time at the computer, taught myself to program, been coding professionally for 40 years, been working with teams for about 30 years, and really involved with Scrum, not in the early days, but mid 2000s, and was involved with Ken Schwaber to start Scrum.org in 2009. And the professional Scrum developer program, worked closely with Ken to bring that into existence. And then in 2014, 15, he wrote that blog post, Unsafe at Any Speed. And obviously Ken's opinions on safe were no different today than they were then. We had to kind of stop what we were doing at Scrum.org and come up with an answer. And guess what? The answer was pretty much still just Scrum. So today I spend my time split between Microsoft's tools, Azure DevOps, Azure-based development, Visual Studio, VS Code, GitHub, and professional Scrum. So sometimes I'll be talking to teams in my capacity as a DevOps tool person, and I'll be also telling them the greatness of professional Scrum, or vice versa. Just finished this book for Microsoft Press. Should be out next month, orderable right now, pre-order. But it's the fusion of professional Scrum and Azure DevOps. I know a couple of people on the call here have reviewed that. And if you want to reach me, there's an email, or catch me on Twitter. Although, to be honest, I'm not on Twitter much these days. Just way too much noise out there for my taste, and I tend to get distracted. So I think you guys want me to just jump right in and kind of talk about the framework. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Tom, this is for you, baby. Let's go to the next slide. I'm just going to keep it brief here. What we have in front of us is the updated Nexus diagram. It was updated based on the Scrum guide. Not really a lot has changed here. In fact, I'll give you bonus points to whoever can find what has changed on this from the previous one.
The hamburger from the retro disappeared.
The hamburger disappeared. Good catch. One other thing. Yes, cross-team refinement. That used to just say product backlog refinement or refinement. That has now been changed to cross-team refinement, and I'll get into that in a moment. The neat thing about this, and I always start with this conversation, is if you squint, this looks like Scrum. You got product backlog, sprint backlog. You've got a team of teams. You've got the daily Scrum. You're creating an increment. It happens to be an integrated increment at this point. You have a review, you have a retrospective, and you do it again. One of the things that we start with is the assumption that any organization that's going to be using a Nexus is already practicing Scrum. Now, that assumes a lot, because this organization's Scrum doesn't look like that organization's Scrum. And just standing up in a circle for 15 minutes a day and then going back and working on your own is not Scrum. So we do make a lot of assumptions there. We like to assume that they're using professional Scrum, which from Scrum.org's point of view is, an adherence to inspect and adapt, being ruthless about improvement, living the Scrum values, the whole bit. But we don't start with the notion that you must set your organization up in a certain way. We start with the assumption that you've already invited a change machine, an improvement machine to live within your organization called Scrum, and you're starting from that point of view. So we make an assumption as well that you're going to have one product owner, one product backlog per Nexus. Product backlog on the left, no different than a single team Scrum product backlog. The backlog then contains everything that you want the product to do, happy things, sad things you want fixed. We call them bugs sometimes. This is constantly being refined. It's more important at scale to refine across teams. Okay, our number one goal here is to, good catch. We removed the term Scrum teams. Our number one goal with the Nexus, if you had to break Nexus down into one term, it's dependencies. We see dependencies across teams. We see dependencies across individual skill sets. We see dependencies across technology stacks, repositories, technical stacks as being a detriment, as being antithetical to delivering value in a timely fashion. That's not to say that some dependencies cannot lead to collaboration with people and then learning. That's one of the views that I like about LeSS. They see dependencies as more coordination, as more opportunities to learn. But we make the assumption that our teams aren't that mature yet, so dependencies need to be squashed. So this framework is an exoskeleton that sits on top of Scrum, and it's all about lighting up dependencies and making them visible, making them transparent so that they can be removed or mitigated. Cross-team refinement up in the left corner there. You guys can see over in the left there. The cross-team refinement is an actual event. In single team Scrum, it's just a practice that's kind of recommended. It's optional. In the Nexus, it's actually an event. Who attends, when you do it, how often you do it is up to the Nexus, but it's very important to be looking across those PBIs, across the different teams, to try to break those things down so that each item can be delivered by one team, and you've got a good idea of which team should be doing that piece of work. Nexus sprint planning is the same idea as a normal sprint planning, except that it's a big room event, if you will. You're going to have all of the Scrum teams participating, the product owners in there, Scrum masters are making sure everything's working, working well. The meeting is going to kick off with a review of the cross-team refined items that are planned for the sprint. You're going to have a Nexus sprint goal, which is going to stitch together all the work all the teams are doing that sprint, or maybe a couple sprints. The items that have been refined are taken to the individual teams to do normal single team sprint planning, and they're gonna size it if they need to. They're going to make their decisions about whether they think they can do those items or not. And the plans are created, individual team sprint goals are created, and individual team sprint backlogs are formed. Nexus sprint planning, the big room event, is done when the last Scrum team's sprint planning is done. Okay, and there'll be a chance to answer some questions here in a minute. I see some popping through on chat. So Jacek and Sebastian, if something's burning, interrupt me and ask me a question.
This question about product owners. Somebody heard, Marek, that you said all the product owners are there.
I didn't mean to say that. The product owner is there. All the Scrum masters are there. You've got one product owner. In this diagram, I might point this out. In scrum.org, we turn the product owner green, and I think the idea there is green is the color of money, at least in the US. So, money, value, they're in charge of maximizing that. That's all the same person, even though it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little green people on this diagram. It's all the same person. So yeah, I'm sorry if I misspoke on that. As an output of Nexus sprint planning is a new artifact called the Nexus sprint backlog. What this is, just the forecasted items for each team. So we don't care about the plan. If you're formulating, individual teams are formatting the plan in the form of tasks or failing acceptance tests or whatever, we don't care about visualizing that. That's each individual Scrum team's business. But what we do want is all of the PBIs that have been forecasted across all of the teams for that sprint to be visible in one artifact called the Nexus Sprint Backlog, so that we can see if there are any cross-team refinement, or sorry, any cross-team dependencies that are occurring during the sprint, and that those can be monitored, and the correct team can be sort of nudged along. For example, you might have a board that shows a visualization that team 1 is depending on team 2's item to be finished before they can start on theirs. Very risky, but this is common, in teams that are just coming along and maybe still have a little more of a component mindset. The visualization on the board would say, hey, why isn't team 2 working on that? So there's lots of arrows pointing to it or strings attached to it. We should go and talk to them, or they should see themselves that they need to move that piece of work along. Inside the big circle, this is just the teams doing their work. We say 3 to 9 Scrum teams. That's akin to 2017 Scrum Guide, 3 to 9 developers. Honestly, if you kind of think of each Scrum team as a developer, it's single team Scrum. So instead of 3 to 9 developers on a team, it's 3 to 9 Scrum teams in a Nexus. The cogs there, the little wheels, represent heavy reliance on automation to get the work integrated. You're going to want your DevOps squared away. You're going to want automated build, automated testing, automated deployments, just so that you can have a chance at getting an integrated increment, built and tested in a regular time. Just as with Scrum, there's a Nexus, there's a daily Scrum for each team, but prior to that, there is a pre-meeting. Representatives of each of the individual Scrum teams, maybe they pick a different person each day, or they have the same person each sprint. It doesn't matter. Someone from each team attends this Nexus Daily Scrum, so that they can make transparent any issues, impediments, any kind of integration issues that other teams might be made aware of. So an example of that might be one of the teams runs into an issue with one of their subscriptions, for Azure, AWS. They might bring that up in the Nexus Daily Scrum so the other teams are aware of it. This is not to say that you're not allowed to go talk to people throughout the day. This is just a formal opportunity that's required for that synchronization. The other members of the Nexus Daily Scrum can take notes, and if something they think might impact their Scrum team, they'll bring that as input into their daily Scrum. So it's just an opportunity to share information across the Scrum teams that can then be served as input to the daily Scrums, and then they can act on it however they want, just in normal single team Scrum fashion. We're creating an integrated increment, not just an increment, but integrated across all the teams. This increment at the end of the sprint, whatever is done according to the definition of done, which I might say, much like LeSS, you've got a common definition of done that all the teams adhere to, but individual teams can also have more items in their personal definition of done. So you might have, testing and integration, documentation and all of these standard things, but then another team might add to their definition of done, we want to do test first. We want to refactor to patterns. We want to, blah, blah, blah. And each team can't have a less rigorous definition of done than the other teams agreed upon. So Nexus Sprint Review, this is where is another big room event, potentially, where the stakeholders are looking at all of the integrated work across all the teams. So we don't have individual Scrum team sprint reviews. We have an integrated increment sprint review where we're bringing in the stakeholders to look at the bigger pieces of work. And this could take a while. So you might need to use some practices in there, like the bazaar or the science fair, have stations around the room, or different Zoom meetings that they can go and look at different parts of the app, or let them review it offline somehow with videos or hands-on, because it could be potentially a lot of people in there. After that, we have the Nexus Sprint Retrospective, which was represented as a hamburger here. And that's how I still like to explain it. You have a pre-meeting with representatives from the teams, just like the Nexus Daily Scrum, where they're sharing their observations throughout the sprint. What went well, what didn't go well, what improvements that they're considering. Other teams can take those notes, bring them into their own individual Scrum team retrospectives. The product owner does need to attend those, so you might have to kind of stagger those a bit or get creative on those when they're scheduled. And then we like to have a follow-up meeting with representatives where the retrospective commitments, the improvements that they're going to, the experiments they're going to try next sprint are shared amongst the other teams, partly for accountability and partly just to share the coolness of what they're considering trying. And then just like in Scrum, you know, rinse and repeat. So that was pretty quick. I went through the loop there. I think I got the important parts, but any other questions just on while this diagram's up?
We have a few in chat.
Yeah, something about the Nexus integration team, please.
Oh, yes, I did kind of skip that, didn't I? Oh, look at the time. We have to go now.
Maybe like guys, what do you think to like go with the like quick Nexus integration introduction, then go to the introduction to LeSS, and then go to the questions, because currently, you know, the more you know, the louder you ask.
Sure.
Yeah, the better is question, and we want to for this to be community driven. So I pasted a link where you can ask questions and also vote.
Nice.
So Richard.
Yeah. So briefly, and I did skip over that. I tend to skip over that because it becomes a long discussion. The Nexus integration team is a poorly named role in Nexus. The assumption is that they're the ones that are going to do the work. They're going to do all the DevOps stuff. They're going to fix your tests and, you know, make you breakfast and make your bed and, you know, clean your toenails. No, the Nexus integration team is a just-in-time team made up of the teams in the Nexus. So there's not a separate external team that handles problems. They are basically, the way I describe it is members of the teams inside the circle there maybe some of them have an armband on that says I'm part of the Nexus integration team, so that should anything happen during the sprint, any integration issues occur, you know, the cog wheels come to a grinding halt, so to speak, the people with the armbands will get together and fix it. So it's about accountability. There's no other team that exists that just does the work for you. They are us, and they come together on a moment's notice, taking, you know, the priority is to go to the Nexus integration team, because we don't want all of these teams in the Nexus to be down while we're having integration issues. And it's not just DevOps stuff. It could be business related. It could be people related. Nexus integration team has got the product owner. It's going to have a Scrum master, and it's going to have as many, I call them team members. They don't necessarily have to be developers, because you might have a season where you need a lot of Scrum masters in there to handle, you know, people issues or organizational challenges. But, you know, in the early stages where you're trying to get the DevOps squared away, there might be a lot of technical people on the Nexus integration team. And if the last thing I'll say, if during the sprint you have no big issues that require the Nexus integration team, there is no Nexus integration team. Okay.
Richard, just a quick question. How long do people hang out on that team on average in your experience? Not the theory, but the practice of Nexus.
It depends on the issue they're facing. I mean,
just on average, are people, is there like sometimes communities of practice in LeSS end up having to set a kind of a limit. We agree to a limit on how much time people spend in a community versus their actual team.
Well, they're required to be in the Nexus integration team as long as there are Nexus integration team issues that they have to fix. It's not a COP.
I see. But in other words, it could be the primary reference for the person rather
guys,
than
I would ask you to like write down your question in the in this slides tool.
Good question, Greg.
And you know, if because this is like unfair for other people, like, you know, we want for the you know, for the question to be community driven, crowdsourced.
Your voice is too powerful, Greg. No one will stand a chance.
Yeah. People are afraid.
You guys have compensated for me.
You are like a hippo.
So that's my presentation.
Okay, so we move to the LeSS.
Yeah, if you have some further questions to the stuff that's already been discussed or that will be discussed, please put it in the slides in the Q&A and prioritize that. So on the other hand, we have large scale Scrum, which comes from a very similar need or a very similar place of trying to replicate the dynamics of single team Scrum in a multi-team environment for the exact same reasons one would want to try Scrum. So you want to have adaptability, you want to have the ability to quickly change direction with your product development based on the needs, and you want to be able to deliver value quickly so that the change doesn't really cost a lot. So because of that, the picture that we have to visualize LeSS is also just a visualization of a sprint, albeit a different one. We do have still a single product backlog, which is prioritized by a single product owner, because we want to have a single source of truth on where the product is, what direction we're going into, and not have to pull things up from a lot of places. We want the product backlog to contain items that are valuable to the customer. So these are not technical items, as in these are not split. We do not differentiate between spec or test or component ABC within the backlog, because this doesn't really bring any value. It's just technical noise. We want to have stuff that will enable us to get feedback from the customer. So we have end-to-end items in the backlog. And in order to be able to deliver these end-to-end items within a single team, we also require the teams to follow the guidelines that we have in original one-team Scrum. So we want teams that have the expertise or the knowledge that is required to deliver a potentially shippable product increment. And again, not a component increment, it's an integrated product increment at the end of the sprint. And we want the teams to be self-managing. Within sprint planning, we have two distinct stages. There is sprint planning 1, which is a joint event across all the teams, or at least all the team representatives, during which the teams pull items from the top of the product backlog. So they choose a subset of items that they think they will be able to work on a sprint, and they take this to sprint planning 2, which can be either a team level event if the team chooses to do so, or if we notice dependencies or common areas of interest, we can have a multi-team planning where we can have several teams having, for example, planning in their own part of the big room and talking to each other whenever they see the need to, for example, go through the details of a testing framework or something along those lines. After sprint planning 2, all the teams have translated their items into their sprint backlogs, and they take on the continuous responsibility of coordination and integration. So the coordination is intentionally marked with the arrow between the team lanes, because it is a intentionally distributed responsibility. So there is no role that LeSS introduces for this. LeSS explicitly mentions that the Scrum Master is not the person who coordinates between the teams. They are, however, someone who can help the teams to get to know techniques that might be helpful for that if the teams have problems coordinating on their own. However, it is definitely not the Scrum Master's responsibility to execute that. And because of observations on how dedicated roles or dedicated processes impact the level of ownership that the teams have with taking over this responsibility, there is no new role introduced like in the case of the NIT, or no new label to talk about. Somewhere along the sprint, there is a product backlog refinement, just like with Nexus. This is a event, and what we want is we explicitly want every team to refine not just the items that they will likely be doing next sprint. Because if we make the mapping between the teams and the items on the product backlog refinement, then this increases the cost of reassigning that later on. If we, for example, find out during sprint review that this team needs to work on a continuation of the stuff that they've been doing last sprint, or whatever changes, if we made the mapping before, then a change will be a lot more costly and therefore unlikely. So we want everybody to look at a bigger subset of the items in the product backlog, so that we can defer the decision as to who does what item to the sprint planning. Afterwards, we have a sprint review, which again is a joint event where everybody inspects and later can adapt on the state of the potentially shippable product increment. And hopefully we get the voice of the customer there so that we can get the feedback from where it matters most.
Hopefully.
Yes, hopefully. That would be nice to see that in more of the organizations that go in this direction. And then we go for a retrospective, which is straight up just a Scrum retrospective. And then the only event which is added when you look at the original Scrum guide, which is the overall retrospective. This looks at cross-cutting system-wide concerns like infrastructure for CI/CD, organizational topics that teams run into that they need help from management with, etc., etc. And this is pretty much it when it comes to the mechanics of the sprint in LeSS. However, unlike what Richard mentioned is a assumption in Nexus, which is that the organization already does Scrum, LeSS notices that a lot of big organizations that do multi-team development are nowhere near a healthy Scrum dynamic. So LeSS also looks at a lot of organizational topics in terms of these things will likely cause this dynamic that we want to not happen. So when we want to have self-managing end-to-end feature teams, we don't want to have any functional organizations, ideally. We don't want to have any component organizations, ideally. And we want to simplify the organization and remove any of the additional roles that might get in the way of the teams taking responsibility over coordination, over their own quality, the way that they deliver, etc., etc. So there is a set of structural adaptations that one needs to do in order to hope for a successful LeSS adoption. And I think that's about it. Did I forget something important, Sebastian?
I was doing administration, so you know.
The key thing here is I think the Scrum Master can also be there for 2 to 3 teams. Just wanted to mention that.
Correct. Yes, a Scrum Master can be assigned to just one team or multiple, but 3 teams is just like a observation. If it's more than 3, then it's really difficult to be useful still.
It's preferred to like have, as a Scrum Master, to have like more than one team to like increase the system thinking. So good catch. So I think we could like move to the questions and answer part because we are late, I would say.
Oh yeah.
Planning is everything, plans are nothing. So
sorry, just to add one quick thing. So again, for people who are wondering what is a feature team, it is actually cross-functional and also cross-component team. Yep. So that is what is called feature team. Yeah.
And self-managing, they're very...
And self-managing, of course.
Yeah. So it also has no internal structure. We've got no roles within the team other than just developer
or other stuff.
As it used to be also in the previous version of the Scrum guide.
Okay, so I will like share the first question. Okay. So the first question is, how does Nexus? Okay, sorry, something happened. With the question.
But in the meantime, how does Nexus scale beyond 19?
Yeah.
So before I answer that, a couple things. One of the prime directive we say in any before we start talking about the Nexus or start introducing the Nexus is, please don't scale unless you really have to. I mean, that's just number 1 rule. Honestly, if you get and I keep saying the term professional Scrum. I like to differentiate between mechanical Scrum, zombie Scrum, dark Scrum, all the other flavors of, people just standing up but not getting things done. If you can honestly get, a high functioning Scrum team of, 10 members or less, they can get a lot of product developed in a sprint if you get all the crap out of the way. So I always start with that. Hey, can we get you down to a single team that's just lightning fast, and can they do the work? If the answer is no, for good reasons, not just because we got to keep a bunch of people employed, that's not a great reason. I don't want to be that person that brings that up. But okay, then we're talking about a Nexus. If your product development is that big, is that complex, requires that many, hands on deck, we'll talk about the Nexus. And if it's so large, that you need more than one Nexus, then the Nexus becomes the unit of scale. And there's really nothing public about Nexus Plus. We talk about it in the 2-day workshop. It's mentioned in the book by the stewards, the trainers of SPS. But I was just looking for that. Someone asked that in the chat window. I was just looking for a landing page I could send you on Nexus Plus. And there just isn't much information because it is so unique at that point. You can't assume any recipes will work for your situation. So we just simply say that if you've got more work than a single Nexus can do, for good reason, not just you have 200 people to keep employed, but you honestly have that much work that a high functioning Nexus couldn't do it on their own, then you add another Nexus. It works on maybe another area of the product. We prefer horizontal areas, horizontal slicing rather than vertical slicing. And yeah, life's going to be bad.
Maybe domain areas like
domain areas, horizontal
like
slicing. So that same thing with a single team Scrum. You don't want to have individuals work on different layers or components. You don't want individual teams in a Nexus to work on different layers and components. You don't want different Nexus to work on different layers or components. But you might not have a chance. It might be that you're building a product so large, one Nexus looks after the platform, another Nexus looks after the partner integrations, another Nexus looks after the core product. I'm thinking of like the Chrome store, things like that. So not great guidance, kind of by design there, Inga.
So to keep this within the comparison spirit of like the topic of this, it sounds like what you would like to be going for is very akin to the idea of requirement areas in going to less huge. It's just the guides are a bit looser than in the case of LeSS, where again, not having like a platform area is kind of required by the rules.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also, there's from the LeSS perspective, there's like something like less huge, and this this answered the same question about how does LeSS scale beyond. Okay, so I'm gonna hide this question and present the next one. Why there should be only one product owner.
You want to take this, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, this just goes back to Scrum 101 here. If you've got multiple product owners, it's going to be difficult to put a definitive order on the work. It's going to be difficult to put, some measure of communicable value on things. You'll have different opinions. You'll have people vying for different strategies, different ordering of the backlog. Now, the follow-up question here, I think Michael is going to be asking is, well, how can one product owner do all of this work? And this is a very common question we get. And I would say, well, what do you think a product owner does? The new Scrum guide does a very good job of describing accountabilities, but almost all of the responsibilities can be delegated. So just like, we just got done with Christmas, I will say this: there's only one Santa, but Santa can have a lot of elves helping him. Okay. So that's the same thing we think about product owners. There's only one product owner. There's only one person that makes that final decision of naughty or nice, but lots and lots of help compiling those lists, making the toys, packing the release, getting the thing out the door. So that's my answer.
This is also, I think, similar to the single source of truth, with the product backlog, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the product owners that do a good job in really big organizations do tend to have a lot of support. So some of them have a skill set of just sitting in a room with 15 product managers going on and on about different things going on in various markets and various different parts of the product. And they will listen to that for like 3 hours, and then they will just go, okay, so here's the plan. So it's not really crucial to only have one person have the entirety of the overview of all the details, but it is very helpful to have just one source of what we're going to do next.
Yeah, the same thing is in LeSS framework, where we say that product owner is not the guy of, gathering requirements and talking as a bottleneck to the subject matter experts, but we say that teams need to work with subject matter experts. For example, the product owner to have like more time to maximize return on investment.
Real quick story. I worked with a pharmaceutical software company in Tucson, Arizona, and they had 9 customer managers, each representing a different customer, Kroger's and Walmart and Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, all the different sort of pharmacy company chains in the US. And they couldn't get anything done because they would plan a sprint, they'd start working, and then Walmart, who represented like 80% of their revenue, would come in and say, stop what you're doing. Walmart needs this, this, and this right now. And they would say yes, because they didn't want to, have that money disappear. So they finally realized they needed this thing called Scrum and this role called a product owner. So they elected a product owner from inside the company, and we gave them the ring of power. And that one ring of power controlled those 9 ring wraiths. It was like a perfect, Lord of the Rings reference. This one product owner had the ability to control those 9, evil creatures that just wanted their own thing all the time. And guess what? As you all on this call know, it works.
Yeah. Maybe not getting into much details, but unless huge, we are having something like product area product owners, and this could be I don't know the whole context, but this could be like similar thing to it. What do you think, Jacek?
It sounds pretty similar.
Yeah,
but there is still one product owner with final word at the end. So area product owner may act as a subject matter expert, whatever. It is just a role supportive for product owner.
Yeah, they don't have the power to override, and the product owner does have the final say. So it's just
chief product owner has the final saying. Yeah, good catch. Thanks. Okay, so I will move to the next question, not next top question. Okay, Greg.
Did Greg hack your survey?
I think so. Greg is also very influential on the poll. Okay, so Richard, how is market reception to Nexus? Any sense of how many companies have adopted Nexus, or better, percent market share in the US or worldwide? Nexus is so much alike LeSS that it would be great to join forces.
Oh man, I love it. I'm going to print this and make a shirt out of this. But yes,
this is like LinkedIn material.
It is. So I will say that when I describe the Nexus to an organization, they kind of cock their heads and say, that's kind of what we're doing. There's nothing really mind-blowing in Nexus. It's just Scrum plus a few extra things. And they might say, well, we don't really formalize that like you recommend. We don't really have one of those. We still do Scrum of Scrums instead of the Nexus Daily Scrum, but yeah, that we're kind of already doing this. So, we don't dispatch the Nexus police and take away their ability to call something the Nexus that doesn't exactly fit our framework. If anything, our framework at scale is even looser than Scrum's framework for a single team. As far as market share, I've seen some surveys. Nexus and LeSS are pretty close. I think they're both very difficult to implement correctly, requiring Scrum to be in place first, or blowing up your organization and redesigning it like LeSS would have it. So that's why I think they're not as popular as just giving the same old people new titles and keeping all the verbs the same. I won't mention that framework. And as far as joining forces, I'm already there, baby.
Voldemort.
I've been trying to to submit a Nexus case study and just call it a LeSS case study because it's pretty darn close. But if you got any influence with the bosses there.
We talked a little bit about it, and we agreed that Nexus could be like a good first step. Like, you know, when you start agile adoption, you have probably many dependencies in your Scrum teams. So Nexus is like systematic way of managing those dependencies. And, you know, we talked with Richard that after a while, if you have like, you know, from the LeSS perspective, your product definition is wider. That means you have less dependencies. That means that, for example, Nexus additional meetings are like something like overhead. Like this is additional, you know, like organization fat, because you don't like need it, you just do it, and you can like you know, agree that you just move to the pure LeSS. Jacek, why are you laughing? I think you are still laughing about this a lot.
I'm looking at the puns in chat as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Nextless and LeSS.
Yeah. So should I move to the next question?
I still love when I sat in Craig's class. I'd sat Bus's class, and you know, Bus was very, very technical, and you know, talking about the framework and you know the refinements and definitions of done. And I'm like, all right, this is great. And then I sat through Craig's class, and a few of you on the call have had that luxury. And his first words just blew me away. He said, "LeSS has nothing to do with scaling, and this class has nothing to do with LeSS." I'm like, wow, you know, I think Doug, you were there, and I'm like, my mind was blown. I'm like, what are we going to do for the next couple of days here? And what he did was continue to blow my mind with all the system modeling and you know the theory behind LeSS, and yeah, that was amazing. If you ever get a chance to sit Craig's class and have your mind blown about why it works
in that 3 days, that I think is possible. Yeah,
right, Doug?
Good.
Yeah. All right, sorry, I was way off track there.
So Jacek and Richard, should I move to the next question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Greg, you can tell us on the chat if we answered your question. Yeah, of course you have video. Much. Okay, so next question. What about reviews where specific PBIs are not interesting for everyone? 30 plus isolated PBIs released every 2 weeks. Even speaking about from 4 to 5 from different areas may be waste of time for some people there. Do you have any good practices beyond shaping dedicated participant list for each sprint review?
Yes, please call on me.
Yeah, go for it, Richard.
So first of all, if sprint after sprint, there are PBIs which are not interesting to everyone / most people, that's a smell that maybe those aren't part of the product, that teams shouldn't be part of the Nexus, just pointing that out. You know, if there's always one team that nobody comes and looks at their stuff in the bazaar, in the science fair, why are they there? So just a thought. Beyond that, rather than curate a list of participants, just be transparent. Hey, in sprint 12, we are showing, you know, these 16 features. Some of these will be interesting to some people, not others, but please come, and then you can go to the station or the little Zoom breakout room for that feature, and we won't waste your time showing you stuff you don't care about. So having that science fair, that car show, bazaar, I've heard it called a bunch of different things, is a way to do it. Or just solicit feedback asynchronously using video or using hands-on and telemetry or something like that.
I'm not a Nexus expert, but maybe there's lack of Nexus sprint goal or something like that, that you have, you know, some not like isolated PBIs that are not, you know, in the same team or something. They're not, you know, achieving anything that would support the Nexus sprint goal.
Yeah, it was not the case. Even if we have 6-7 teams, and okay, the sprint goal may be collective for 3 of them. Let's assume the remaining 4 may be out of this sprint goal. So working on the different items from the backlog, because product or our goal is not so huge to be done by 9 teams.
So we can like talk with Jacek that from the LeSS perspective, maybe the product definition was too narrow, for example.
Yeah, I was looking more for inspiration, and I'm taking one from Richard about making some breakout sessions. So it was more about inspiration, and there may be also some smelly things behind the scenes. So taking this one also.
Yeah, the diverge merge pattern of like a sprint review bazaar or whatever you want to call it is very common in both LeSS and Nexus. I think it's pretty much the same, and I don't really have anything to add after what Richard mentioned.
Also, open space, something similar.
Yep.
Okay, so I move to the next question. Jacek, do you want to read it?
Sure. Unless team members are dedicated, each person is a member of one and only one team. One reason for that is to be able to share responsibility for achieving a common goal. How does this shared responsibility work in Nexus when someone is member of a team and of the NIT? So Nexus integration team.
Good question. Thanks, Robert. So again, since LeSS and Nexus are both based on Scrum, and Scrum encourages long-lived teams, you know, form, norm, storm, perform, and then start to swarm. I actually coined that 5th one. We want the same thing, but even more than that, we want the whole Nexus not to come to a grinding halt if there are cross-cutting problems in the integration, in the tooling, in the people, in the culture. So we say that, you know, yes, you are your primary purpose is on a Scrum team, working out of the sprint backlog, helping achieve the Nexus sprint goal. And if anything should go wrong, you've got to take on the accountability of being a Nexus integration team member, because it's more important to get the wheels moving again than it is for you to go back to your team and still be working. And that's just a decision that we made. I'm going to say primarily Ken here, because Ken understands that accountability piece. Should there be no problems? Hey, party on. You're on your Scrum team, just like you're saying, you're dedicated, happy as a clam. If there's a problem, your accountability on the Nexus integration team kicks in, and you've got to go and spend whatever time it takes to get those wheels back on so that it can get the thing moving again.
Maybe, you know, the accountability, the difference between accountability of integration and responsibility could be also the answer, but it's not easy one, as you said. Nexus integration team, as Richard says, is like accountable for the integration, not responsible. So they are not, so the, you know, as I understand Richard, help me, like the whole purpose is to, you know, like inspect the integration all the time.
Yep.
As a Nexus integration team, but do the integration by the hands of teams, by the team's
Correct.
members. So from the, okay, sorry, I think we will do a better job.
Could you pivot back to the Nexus diagram? Is that doable?
Yeah.
Just real quick. I want to point out something that some of you might think is a really weird thing for me to say, but some of you might get it too. If you squint at this diagram and think of this as a single team Scrum, where the teams in the middle circle are just individual developers, the thing off to the side there called Nexus integration team, I'm gonna do something weird here. I'm gonna say that's the Scrum master of the Nexus. Okay, it's multiple people, so it's a team of Scrum masters, if you will. But what does a Scrum master do in a single team Scrum? They identify problems that the teams can't identify themselves, but then how do they address those problems? Through the light touch of coaching, consulting, mentoring, training. But if everything else fails, they've got to do the work themselves. That's the same thing with the next integration team. Yes, I'm on the next integration team. Yes, I've identified a problem. Yes, I'm being, called to service on that team, but I'm still going to have the individual Scrum team people best they can do the work. I don't want to just get the green light and then I go start doing the work. I want to get the green light and then I teach people, I pair up, we do some mobbing, we do some shared video, whatever, so that I can teach them how to put the wheels back on next time themselves, so to speak. Just like a good Scrum Master. All right, sorry.
Instead of helping with the answer, I feel like extending the question. You mentioned, Richard, that the Nexus integration team is not a stable entity. It's made up of different people over different periods of time. But when there's a need to change the composition of the NIT, whose responsibility is it, and how is the decision made?
So again, questions like that, like who represents, who should be elected, who should be selected. We take the easy answer, which is we let the Nexus decide that. Just like in single team Scrum, we say let the team decide some of those things. In the Nexus, we say let the Nexus decide. So if they want a round robin, if they want to do, voting system, we don't care. We just say do your best to put the right people on the next integration team, for the next sprint. Ideally, you would change that composition during the retrospective.
There's like another question on the chat that is in the scope, I think, of this question. Does that mean that Nexus integration team needs to have senior developers? So as I understand you, Richard, this is not the case, because you are like doing inspect and adapt, and like you are in different seasons of agile adoption.
Right.
So in like spring, you could probably need more Scrum Masters or something like that, or
Exactly.
some similar roles in the organization, maybe managers or someone, or architects. And then probably as you progress to the winter, the composition will change. And I think this is like the heart of Scrum, that you are adapting your ways of working to the situation, to what you need.
That's exactly right. And nobody can predict tomorrow's weather, but I do think an organization has some idea of the seasons. If we just acquired some company and we're going to need to integrate systems, maybe we put some integration specialists on the NIT. If we are going into a season where, gosh, we've been sequestered and locked down and Zoom meetings, for 1 year with COVID, maybe we need to put some, some minstrels and musicians on the next integration team to have some happy hours or something like that. Some psychologists and psychiatrists. I don't,
because probably this is a good idea, I think, because for example, the integration could move from technical integration to the people integration.
Yeah, exactly. We don't differentiate between, when we say the term dependencies, a lot of technical people think, oh, right to this service depends on that service. And that is one type of technical dependency, but there's people dependencies, domain dependencies, tool technology dependencies. We identify, I think, half a dozen in our workshop, and each of those needs to have, we use the term integration to mean the fix or the mitigation of a dependency. So integration is the solution to dependency in our rough definition.
Okay. I think guys, that we like reached the end of time box.
We failed again, but this was a pretty happy failure, because this time I think it was pretty engaging, but we are nowhere near the amount of time that we need to get through all the questions. I did see, however, quite a lot of suggestions to make a repeat of this session.
Yeah, will be good.
You could probably just share the video of this, like skip the introduction next time and just have like a pure Q&A session and see how that goes, maybe.
So
If
from the
everybody's up for it.
from the last questions, when the next one?
We need to, like, check up with Richard, and then we will come back to you. Because we don't know if this session was successful for example, Richard, and we need to like see the feedback on the meetup.com and and other stuff. So if it's possible, could you everyone wave to the camera? I would like to have a short clip for the LinkedIn social medias. So I'm very grateful for your anticipation. It was mind-blowing. Richard, we are very grateful for your knowledge and and experience.
No problem.
Do you want to add
for having me.
anything?
No, thanks for having me. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'll come on anytime you want me to chat some more, answer some questions, and yeah, I was impressed with all the people that joined us today. I'm glad there's that knowledge and awareness out there. I appreciate that.
Awesome, great.
Yeah, I have a reflection, Richard, that some topics, as we said, as we talked, like Nexus integration team is like the source of infinite confusion.
Oh, I know. When we were designing the Nexus, and I'm going to throw Ken under the bus here because that was Ken's term, and I'm like, slow motion in a movie, no, and he'd already blogged about it or something, so we couldn't change it because it was already, the ship had already sailed. And I'm thinking people are going to look at that and think it's like the system team from SAFE that just does your laundry for you and makes your breakfast and all of that. And that is so against Scrum that I spend most of my time just explaining that. I did say SAFE, okay.
Yeah.
Hashem, I'm gonna drink. I said SAFE.
Voldemort.
Said it again.
It was over the time limit, so it doesn't count.
Oh,
yeah.
All right, good.
This is like unofficial discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I'm cool to do if you guys want to keep going. There's still some people online, or we can save it for another meeting.
What would be easier, to keep going today, or schedule another meeting with you, Richard? But it's from one perspective, I think that it can be unfair for the people that planned 1 hour for it.
That's true.
Yeah, we lost about 50 people already.
Yeah.
Well, it's either this or I jump over to a GitHub Enterprise managed users and Azure Active Directory discussion, which this sounds way more fun than that. Anybody here doing GitHub Enterprise? No? Thumbs up. Like, Augie, you're going to jump over to that one? You are, because you're a sponge. You just learn everything. All right. Shout out to the Croatians. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And
Richard,
the Wisconsians and the Oregonians. And I don't know where everyone else is. Any Germans?
Yeah, here.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
our friends, our friends at Germany, promoted the event, and we have I think probably 50 people from Germany, something like that.
Ganz gut.
Very good. Sehr gut.
Yeah. Richard, I think we can probably answer some questions in offline form.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
probably I think the wisdom of the crowds created some interesting questions, so we can do it.
Yeah. So are you saying the wisdom, we just put the question on Twitter and the answer is the answer?
I'm talking more about, because we have like over 100 people. They asked some cool, interesting questions that aren't anywhere answered. And, and probably you are one of the, people that could answer it.
Oh boy. Well, then that would be maybe another meeting or another time.
Yeah, something like that, or maybe offline, and we do some article or something. But this is like future plans. So this is going a little bit awkward, I would say. But
yeah, we'll just figure out another time slot. So we'll make the video available so that people can watch the introduction, and we can not do the introduction again and just have the entire time slot for the questions. And we'll reach you through the same channel. So primarily the meetup. We'll also try and propagate this on LinkedIn, so that even more people can join if they're interested, or maybe some of the people who wanted to join but couldn't make the time in this particular slot. So thanks a lot, and hope to be seeing you on the next one as well. Thanks.
Yep.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right, cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Tschüss.
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 Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
bye.